Why is modern music so bad? So, why is modern music so bad? Hang on, maybe it isn't bad. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just you, too. This is a common theme. People of a certain age will say stuff like, modern music, it's just unlistenable, or it's nothing but noise. I have to wonder, when was the first time anyone said this? I know for sure that people said this in the 1960s. How? Because I was there. I enjoyed the music. Old people didn't. To them, it was just noise. Then people who liked 60s music said that 70s music was just noise. 80s music? Well, I didn't really get it at the time. All those synthesizers mostly played with one finger. And 80s rock? Well, when you have a perfectly good drum kit, why not just replace the whole thing with samples, even live? It's not really quite part of my argument, but I didn't find the sound of 80s music harsh, or it's just noise. I just didn't like 80s music then, but I do now. Let me lump the 1990s and 2000s together, when musical arrangements were basically wall-to-wall or speaker-to-speaker distorted guitars. And quickly coming up to date, it's just distorted everything behind a vocal. Come on, apart from the vocal, it really is just noise. But I'll go back to what I said earlier, people of a certain age. It is an age thing, definitely. The average music lover, and that includes just about everyone, is exposed to the currently popular musical styles in their so-called formative years. I'm using that expression flexibly to mean up to around 20. After that, everything new becomes just noise. I'll ask you to ask yourself a question. Think of your favourite music, anything from pop to rock, punk to classical. When were you first exposed to it? Probably under the age of 20. But there may be stuff you like that you heard more recently. Do you love it? Really love it? Or does it just remind you of music you first heard when you were young? Now, I'm not going to begrudge young people their current choice of music. If they like it, they like it. They do seem to be buying it, or at least streaming it, no less than in the good old days. That would be the good old days when one album on CD cost 10 great British pounds or more. So they seem to like this just noise, just like I did back in the 1960s. I'm going to change tack a little bit now to explore why modern music is just noise, to my older ears, and perhaps your older ears too. I have 2 examples. 2 tracks I've been listening to lately. I have to say that despite this being a review of the tracks and therefore 100% fair use under copyright law, I may get a copyright claim on this video. If I do, then I'll have to mute the music. But I'll put links down in the description box. And you can, of course, search for it yourself on your favourite streaming service, which I hope you'll do anyway to listen further and in more detail. So, here's example number 1. It's Chaise Longue by Wet Leg. Wet Leg are a duo from the Isle of Wight in England, and apparently a wet leg is someone who's not an islander. Well, that's the story, but I'm not sure I believe it. So that's a 10-second clip from near the end of the track. Oh dear, I'm old enough to remember when hi-fi first achieved 0.1% distortion. Modern digital audio has something more like 0.001%. What's the percentage distortion here? Well, I don't think I could put a figure on it, and perhaps an adjective might be more appropriate. Massive, horrendous. Why? OK, let me look at it in a different way. Subjective loudness is important these days, and streaming services have normalization so that every track is pretty much equally loud. So Spotify normalizes subjective loudness to -14 loudness units relative to full scale. -14 lufs, we can call it. 0 lufs would be as loud as it's possible to go in digital audio, and you'd need a square wave to achieve it. Another comparison would be broadcast television, where the standard is -23 lufs in Europe and -24 lufs in the USA. Compared to this, streaming services are loud, and getting to that degree of loudness doesn't happen by accident. I'm getting to why this track sounds so distorted. I said that Spotify normalises to minus 14 LUFS. Well, that's if you have normalised volume set to on, which is set by default. If you switch this off, you'll hear the track as the mastering engineer, and presumably the producer and label, intended. Minus 5.9 LUFS. Ouch! That's more than 8 decibels louder than Spotify's minus 14 LUFS standard. So, if you have normalised volume set to on, those 8 decibels are wasted. That's 8 decibels of dynamic range the mastering engineer could have used but chose not to. But more than just wasting dynamic range, the issue is what has to be done to achieve such a high LUFS level. The answer is heavy limiting on the master track, for starters, and clipping in the individual instrument and vocal tracks will help. Oh yes, clipping. That's the clipping that trainee sound engineers, such as I once was, were taught to avoid at all costs. But these days, there's a plug-in for that. Let's move on to my second example. It's I Wrote a Song by Mae Muller. Again, I've measured a 10-second clip towards the end of the song. Minus 4.6 LUFS. That's just crazy. It's almost 10 decibels above Spotify's loudness standard, and almost 10 decibels of dynamic range wasted. More than that, again, all that heavy limiting required and probable clipping, resulting in a sound that is, to my ears, unpleasant. Simply unpleasant. A small caveat here, LUFS measurements are taken over the entire track, so Spotify won't lower the level quite so much as I've said. But the clipping and limiting remain, resulting in extreme distortion and an unpleasant sound. But it's an age thing. This isn't the music I was raised on, so it's almost inevitable that I'm not going to like it. But I really have nothing against the music itself, just the sound. Over to you. What do you think? Is modern music actually bad, or is it just bad to older ears? Or is it perhaps not the music, but the sound? Would the music sound better without so much distortion? Many questions. I'm sure you have all the answers. In the comments. See you soon.